take the good with the bad. If you ain't first, then you last. I get up early, I ain't wasting no time. I'm stacking that cash money like I'm baby, like 98 Master P, I'm going crazy.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Attack in the Paint podcast. I'm your host, James Ivy Williams. And today we are going to answer a few questions that I got asked on a social media questionnaire last week. And so these questions are pretty much just going over my views and thoughts on basketball scouting, basketball recruiting, team building, and my overall principles for scouting. My notes are over here. If you wonder why I'm looking over here, my notes are over here, and my questions are over here. So just to give you a quick background, James Williams, founder and CEO of Between the Lines Sports. Been running the business Between the Lines Sports for the past 8 years now. Previously worked in the NBA with the Canton Charge / Cleveland Cavaliers. Also worked with the Atlanta Hawks for a little while. And most recently, obviously been running Between the Lines Sports, basketball scouting / media outlet for the past 8 years. We're based in Atlanta. Teams scattered all over the world. Won't go into detail about that, but just doing a good job of really covering the entire landscape of basketball. So without further ado, let's jump right in. First question is, and I'll put the questions right here so you guys can see them. First question is, what are my scouting principles? Right. This is a big question, and I had to formulate this because there were several questions that kind of correlated to the same context. So kind of put it together. So what are my scouting principles? And it's not a one-word answer. I mean, it kind of goes into a little bit of everything. It depends on what level of basketball I'm scouting. What am I scouting for? All those things kind of matter. But to put it in a nutshell, the first thing that I do and the most important thing that I do is I write down what I see. Always write down what I see. I have no skin in the game as far as I don't care where players end up. I don't care if a player gets drafted. I don't care not in a bad way. I'm rooting for everyone to be successful, obviously, but I have no skin in the game. So I'm not concerned about where a player goes. So I'm not trying to sell a coach on a player. If I think a player can play, and I tell a coach that's what it is. If I think a player can't play, I'll tell a coach that's what it is. So I don't try to sugarcoat things. I don't try to hide my opinions. I may not publicly voice my opinions on younger players, high school players in particular. I don't necessarily publicly voice negative feelings about players. That's more so in a private manner. But once we start talking about drafting guys getting paid money to do this, the opinions are a little bit more public for that reason. So pretty much I write down what I see. And I tell my scouts this and my analysts this all the time. If you write down what you see, no one can ever challenge what you write because it's the truth, right? So if your eyes say this, if this is what you saw, then that's what it is. I do a good job, or I try to do a good job of really encouraging my guys to not be enamored by names, rankings, people who talk a lot. If you're in the gym a lot, you find there's tons of players, media people, parents, whoever the case may be, that talk a lot. And before you know it, you'll be influenced by what people are saying. And so for that reason, I do my best to not go into any event that I go cover, especially for high school guys, with any preconceived notions about players, especially players that I have not seen. So if this guy may be ranked really high, but I haven't seen him play, I'm going to watch him as he's a regular player. I don't even write names down when I'm scouting for that purpose, just to make sure that I'm not swayed in any way by what anyone else says, right? I also encourage my guys, when we're scouting for the draft, if we're in person, it's great because obviously you're really not going to get a lot of commentary from people. But for the sake of when you're watching film, I always cut the sound down because the commentators are then going to give you commentary. They're going to sell you on the player's, family background, the struggles that they may or may not have, the work ethic, all the things that they found out. And that also tells a compelling story. So I do my best to block out all the outside noise is what I try to do. Block out all the outside noise, write down what I see, and then I go back and review my notes. And then I'm going to formulate my opinion on this player based off what I wrote. Right. And even with that, it's not the first time. Right. When I scout a player, I need to, and you guys have probably heard me say this before if you've been following the podcast and the platform for a while. I don't really formulate an opinion on a player for at least 3 or 4 games. And the reason is because these guys are people, right? And they're young people for that matter. And so anything could be going on with these young people. You never know what it could be. It could be, I've said this line before, could have just broke up with his girlfriend. could have just failed a test, could have just got chewed out by his parents about not doing chores, or things great could happen. He just could have passed the test. He just could have proposed his girlfriend and she said yes in this big spectacular way in front of the entire school, or he just got a new car, or just got new shoes, or got a new fresh haircut. All these things could have an impact on a player's performance because people are people, right? Emotions matter, and so up or down, good or bad, you have to be clear about what you're seeing, what you're writing, and for that reason, I want to see this player at least 3 or 4 times before I formulate an opinion. Still while still leaving it open that at some point I could change my mind, right? Or at some point the player could change my mind. I could be not high on a player and watch them a little bit more and then realize they're more talented than I thought, or I could watch them a little bit more and realize they're not as talented as I thought. Like it's very open ended. There's a lot of gray area here. It's not black or white. I think the problem that a lot of evaluators have at all of the levels is they want to put somebody in a box really quick and move on to the next. And that's not fair to players. And I'm going as a former player, I never wanted to be underscouted, and I never wanted to be put in a box before the time came for me to be put in that box. It's like if you really have a good feel for me, then that's fine. But you're not going to get a good feel for me watching me one time. I don't care who it is. Well, I will say this. I told this story the other day. I remember seeing Anthony Edwards play for the first time in high school. And this is the first and only time I've ever done this. It was the Elite Eight Tip-Off Classic run by the guys that run AOT. Dame, I can't remember Dame's last name, but he kind of runs AOT, and so they run this high school event in McEachern High School every year. And the final game of the day was McEachern versus Holy Spirit, which was Anthony Edwards' team. And McEachern was loaded with Sharif Cooper, Isaac Okoro, and several other Division I players on the team. They had 5 on their starting 5. There are 5 guys on that team that ended up going Division I to be Division I basketball players. And the day was long. The day was really long, right? The day was really long. Like the game started at around 10. Their game was supposed to start at 8 p.m., but there were several overtime games, so the game started later. And I got up after the first 3 plays Anthony Edwards did, and I was like, he's a pro. And it's the only time I've ever done this. Obviously, I'm right. He's an all-star USA team, all that stuff now. But it was the first and only time I've ever like, okay, I saw everything I need to see. And it was just something about the way he moved, something about the way he impacted movement on the court from the other team, how he manipulated the defense to do things that he wanted to do, how he shot the ball, his athleticism. All those things happened literally in 3 plays. And I was like, I saw everything I need to see, and I got up and I left. But typically, I won't get up and leave. I'm going to watch the entire game. So that's my one time that I have gone against my own principles, which is I'm going to watch somebody multiple times. And obviously I saw more after that, and I was obviously not wrong about what I thought. But that first time I saw him, I was like, he's a pro. And I got up and left. The second question is, and this is a very touchy subject because it's all based on perspective of the person who's saying it. Is basketball political when it comes to scouting, drafting, and recruiting? And the answer is yes and no, right? Yes and no. So the answer is yes. Basketball is political. And so let's dive deep into this question. Is basketball political? So for the player, first, for the player that is not highly touted, doesn't have necessarily a high ranking, can that player be evaluated, under scouted? The answer is yes, because people typically follow the trends. It's just what happens. It's how people are. That's why it's like in anything else. There could be a great movie, but if the movie isn't pushed properly, no one sees the movie. There could be a great album or record out, but if it's not pushed properly, people don't hear it. It's the same thing with basketball players. There could be a really great player, but if he's not pushed properly and or marketed properly, or even just talked about by the people who have a following, the person may not be seen. Is that political? Yes, of course it is. Because there's something to gain from pushing something, and that's just the truth about it. There's something to gain by pushing something and or somebody. So there are stars that probably are not as talented as people that are not stars, right? And vice versa. And that's the same thing in basketball. And so there's the first thing. So our recruiting, guys getting to go to college. Are there talented players at all levels, yes, they probably could play higher up. Yes, and we're seeing that now because of the transfer portal new rules. Guys can pretty much transfer up and or down a lot. And so a lot of players that are probably going higher when they hit into that portal later and they're not getting the same looks that they were getting coming out of high school is probably because they weren't evaluated properly, which means they were probably mis-scouted and misevaluated. And now they're going to lower levels. And then the guys coming from those lower levels and moving up to the higher levels because they were underevaluated and underscouted. These are all true things, right? It happens, right? And it's the same thing that happens as guys coming from college going to the pros, right? I was watching this quick little docu-series about what's the guy's name? Cooper Kupp, the football player Cooper Kupp, and they were talking about how he dominated at his level in college, and people still undervalued him as a receiver coming out of college because of the level that he played on. And it's the same thing in basketball in particular. If you play at a lower level, it's going to be a lot harder. And the reason I'll say this, it's harder because people don't trust their eye, right? And you know why people don't trust their eye, in my opinion? People don't trust their eye because they don't have the eye to actually evaluate properly. A lot of people get into these jobs and they don't have the skill set and or expertise to actually trust what they see. And if you can't trust what you see, you're always going to question, well, is it just because he's dominating at this level? Can he really do it here? The truth is this: if you can play, you can play, right? There are obviously times that guys just may be a little bit more talented than where they're playing. That happens everywhere you go. But there's also the difference. You have to be able to differentiate that from, can he play at this level? And no matter who he's playing against, is he going to be able to do this? Larry Bird's a great reference because Larry played at a lower level at Indiana State. Took his team all the way to the national championship game. Obviously did really well in the NBA for years and years and years. But I don't think back then people were saying Larry couldn't play. No one ever questioned if Larry's talent would transcend to where he came from in college, because obviously he went to Indiana first before he transferred to Indiana State. If you know the story, he left school and then ended up at Indiana State a year or so later. Not going to go into that, of course. So, but the truth is, if you are from a lower tier school, you may not get the same opportunities. Every now and then it kind of supersedes. Stephen Curry, we've seen it several times in recent years. Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, CJ McCollum in particular, guys that went to lower tier schools, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, these are all these weren't none of these kids went to Power 5 schools, they end up being all NBA players in particular. That's just in recent time. And it happens more often than not, or guys that are undervalued that maybe go to Power 5 schools but don't have the physical attributes or the athleticism that an NBA team wants, and they end up doing a lot better than people think. Draymond Green in particular. And so it just depends. So Draymond Green's under-scouted, undervalued because of his body type. He's not as big as what people think he should be, but he ends up being a dominant force and the emotional leader and all those other things for the Golden State Warriors because of how he plays, and his undervalued perception obviously was a component for him being successful because it put a chip on his shoulder. So all those things matter, right? So political, right? So why do people decide who to push and who not to push? It's investment. It's time. What can you get from them? I hate to say it, but sports is a business where people are trying to get their pockets and their hands greased at every turn. And it's just one of those things, especially at the grassroots level, even going into college a little bit. Again, no knock. It's just the nature of the business. It's the nature of the business. But the truth is, people that can play I believe will always get to where they can get if they can overcome the no's, right? You have to be able to overcome no's, right? Barack Obama didn't win his first political race for an alderman or something like that in Chicago, or a small district congressman or something like that in Chicago. Local is what he didn't win. He lost to a seasoned veteran politician. He turns into the president of the United States. Even when he came from president, he was a junior senator or congressman, one of those. He was a junior. He wasn't even just he went from junior congressman and or senator to the president of the United States. So there's something there but again, same thing. Somebody saw something in Barack Obama and then they pushed him. And once you're pushed, everything changes. It's the same thing in the executive field. Some guys are fast tracked to the top, right? It just is what it is. It's okay. Some guys that are players, some guys that don't have playing backgrounds, they're fast tracked because someone sees something in them that says, oh, I want to make sure that this person gets to where I think they should be. And that's just how it works. And all of that is politics in some, because you have to have some sort of backing, some sort of support. And once you have that backing and support, you elevate. Unfortunately, there are plenty of people that don't have backing and support who have to kind of grind their way through it and slowly showcase their skill set, talent, and all that thing and all those things to make it to the level that they think they can make it to. And a lot of those guys, it takes a lot longer to achieve their goals, and maybe their trajectory of success, their trajectory of financial gain isn't as great because they had to start at a lower tier to get there. But eventually they succeed and they become who they're supposed to be. As my grandma used to say all the time, the cream rises to the top. Sometimes it rises fast, sometimes it rises slow, but the cream always rises to the top. And if you think you're the cream, just wait. Nipsey Hussle had a great line too. He said the only endearing quality that he had in his struggle and his pursuits to become successful before his passing was that he didn't quit. Right? A lot of us give up too fast, and so all these things. So in politics, people will try to break your will and break your spirit, and you can't quit. You have to have this blind faith in yourself, this unordinary or extraordinary confidence in yourself that can supersede the negativity and the no's that you're going to ultimately receive in life. So it is what it is. So those are so yes, basketball is political. People talk a lot of shit. You have to supersede it and press forward behind it, right? And then the last question that I got: what's more important, the person or the player? Right? And when I hear that question, I think analytics and the eye test, all those things, right? And to me, it's the honest God truth. It's the person, right? I think people are talented. Everyone in the NBA. I'm taking this as in college, NBA, like high level people trying to shoot for national championships, people trying to make it to the NBA. The person's the most important part to me. I actually love analytics. I think they're super valuable and important to the growth of the game. I think analytics have always been in the game, but they just weren't necessarily talked about in analytical terms. So like it's something that I've always kind of like known. That's probably why I gravitated to it and the understanding of it so quickly was because it's always kind of been talked about, but just not in math sense, right? And so, but for me, it's the person, because as I talked about earlier, our emotions are the most important aspect of us. And if you guys probably heard this before too. If your confidence is shot, your game's going to be shot, right? So confidence is probably the most important aspect to a player's skill set and talents. And some people can rip away confidence and tear confidence down, and some people can build it up. All these questions kind of go hand in hand now that I'm thinking about it too. But so you have a coach that tears you down and you don't believe in yourself, and you're starting to second guess your skill set and your confidence, and then you have somebody to build you up, and they'll have you running through brick walls, as they say, right? And so for me, it's the person. So what I'm looking for with the person is this. I think about this like building a team. I'm going to move back. I'm going to show you guys. I hope you guys can see this. If not, I'll pick it up so you can see this really quick. This is a quote from Becky Hammond, and it says, just because you have the ingredients doesn't mean you can cook, right? And to me that talks about just because you put talented people around each other don't mean those players mesh well together, right? And because it doesn't mesh well, it doesn't necessarily equate to a successful team. I think when they don't mesh well, then you're not going to equate to a successful team. While you can have talent, so people look at talented people and automatically assume that they should just figure it out. Everybody doesn't always merge and mesh well together, and so for that reason, I'm looking at the people first, right? So mindset, upbringing, all those things matter. And so if I'm building a team, this is how I do it, right? So let's say I don't have a star. If I don't have a star, I'm looking for emotionally intelligent, high basketball IQ, highly skilled players that can be around multiple types of successful people, right? Whether it's a ball dominant player or a player that wants to get off and share. I'm looking for someone that can be embedded around a pillar, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a pillar first, right? If we don't have the pillar, then I'm looking for those emotionally intelligent, high basketball IQ, high skilled players, right? And that sounds easy, but it's not, right? Because you have to really do your due diligence when researching and evaluating these players, and you want to find guys that can overcome adversity, that can that are self-motivated, that have been taught how to work well on teams. All these things matter. So where they were coached, how they grew up, their own internal desires to be great, all those things matter to me, right? So the person's makeup is huge, and for the sake of building a team. And then from there, we never can predict truthfully what someone's outcome will be. We are just hoping for the best. But the best way you can do that is those baselines first. And that goes into intel, right? Really, like you really want to do your due diligence with finding out what kind of teammates they are, if they're encouraging, if they're listening, if they're receptive to information, do they want to be coached hard? All those things matter. And so I feel like that kind of person, you can put them around a star. And once that star has the pieces necessarily, then I think everyone kind of thrives. But at the same time, you have to have the right kind of star as well. You want to have the kind of star that is also self-motivated and hungry and has a desire to get better and a desire to compete every day and isn't necessarily concerned about what's going on off the court once he steps on those lines. And so all those things matter too. So you have to pick the right star and the right pieces around that star, in my opinion, in order to build and grow a team. So is it the person or the player? It's the person every time. Now again, they have to be able to play. But it's the person first, right? Let's just assume they can play. They have to be able to play, but it's the person. Who are you as a person, right? And everything, and there's no sauce that you can just figure it out. It's effort. And again, if you got the right people looking and the right people doing the research and the right people evaluating and the right people making decisions, then you can build something that can be sustainable, right? And again, we all get it wrong. We all are a victim to information. We all are a victim to TV, media. We're all victims to those things, but we have to be able to overcome them to try to make the best decisions possible. I always tell my guys, as now I do a lot more leading as opposed to scout. I still scout. Don't get it twisted. I still scout, but I'm definitely encouraging them to do their due diligence. And so when they're giving me information, I'm processing that information. So then when we're doing our mock in particular, going into the draft, I'm making the best decision possible where to slot guys. That's kind of the point, right? That's the main point of it all, to be honest, is gather the information, process the information, and make a decision based off the information. The other thing is, for me, I've got to be comfortable with every decision I make, whether people agree with me or not. I think that's the sign of a leader. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not always the smartest person in the room. And I'm also comfortable enough in my own skin to make a decision that isn't popular with other people. I don't know if everyone has that, and that's okay. I just know that I do. And I have to be comfortable with being alone by myself. And the cool thing about me is I've always kind of felt that way in the first place. It's my upbringing. It's how I grew up with three brothers in a house, and I felt alone. Not to go deep into my personal information, my personal background, but when you're not like anyone else, you automatically feel alone. So I've never had a problem making a decision that was, unpopular. I've never had a decision being, the guy that's over here while the group's over there. And so I think my makeup is perfect for the position I'm in right now in my business, because it doesn't matter. My guys could be all mad. They've been mad before. I don't agree. That's fine. I hear you. I understand. I respect your opinion. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision that's best for us. It's the same thing when you're running a team or you're coaching a team. It may not be the popular, it may not be the consensus, but you have to have the cojones to make, the decision that's best for the entire group. And that's kind of how it works. So those are the three questions. I hope I answered them well. For the people that participated in the survey, I really appreciate it. We may do this again just to kind of get some more questions. I kind of like answering these questions. So first one, what are my scouting principles, which I kind of told you guys, write down what you see. Is basketball political? Yes. And what's more important, the person or the player? The person. So those are the questions that I've answered. And I want to kind of end this with a quick story time. I've had some amazing experiences and some not so amazing experiences. And some of you guys have heard this story, but it's one of the stories that kind of gets a lot of attention because it happened to me, and it was very personal. I'm gonna take a quick sip of coffee. Hope it's not hot still. As you guys see the Scott Life right there, hashtag Scott Life. If you made it this far into the podcast, hashtag Scott Life. If you made it this far into the podcast. Oh, this is my trusty BTO Tumblr, by the way. You see the other stuff back here as well. So The first year I started BTL, I'm going to try to get through this story really, really quick. I may leave some stuff out just to kind of get to the meat and potatoes of everything. So first year I started BTL, I was working at another company. Started doing videos on YouTube. You guys probably heard the story. Got reached out to by a G League coach, asked me how much I would charge to do videos for him. I didn't know. Had never thought about it becoming a business. It was just more so a hobby for me at the time. Gave him a number. I did some videos for him. He suggested I go to the G League Showcase, which at that time was in Mississauga, Canada, which is a suburb of Toronto. Actually, and by FYI, the G League Showcase has been moved to Orlando this year, which I'm excited about because that's really close to Atlanta, so I can get there a lot easier than having to go to Vegas. Anyways, he suggested I go to the G League Showcase. I lied to my boss and tell him I have to go to Toronto for a wedding. I lied to my wife and tell her that I have to go to